Now this is the big river.
When we mention Egypt, three images come to mind: the pyramids, the desert, and that long and impressive river called the Nile. Sound familiar? But let us start by talking about that vast sea of sand known as the Sahara Desert. This place in the north of Africa is not an appealing place to live. However, thousands of years ago, there were abundant rains in the heart of Africa. Little by little, a flow of water was created, and gradually it started to grow. These waters became one of the largest rivers in the world, the Nile. Many people have settled near this river. But living by the Nile has its ups and downs. In the wet season, the Nile grows so much that all lands around it are flooded. But when the water retreats, the land is ideal for farming, since the riverbed has fertilized the surrounding soil. Thousands of years ago, people that had been nomads started building their homes around the Nile. This is how ancient Egypt was born. The Egyptians learned how to grow crops on rich and fertile land. The food was plentiful. This meant that instead of traveling in search of food, the Egyptian people could stay in one place, farming all the food they needed.
You had to search for food all the time, Mommy?
Yes, but not anymore, honey. The Egyptians were very clever in using the flooding of the Nile to their benefit. They invented an irrigation system, which let them grow even more crops. Jobs such as surveyor were invented. Like modern-day engineers, surveyors measured lands and planned how to build the irrigation canals and many other things. The surveyors started to use mathematical calculations to help them plan. Later, this understanding of math would help the Egyptians build great works. The Nile brought the Egyptians another amazing benefit: trade. The crops, food, and other goods the Egyptians produced were put on boats and sold up and down the Nile. Soon, the river became a large highway where goods and peoples traveled, trading with each other, which made the Egyptians quite wealthy. With the abundance of wealth, the plentiful food, and the mobility to trade with other peoples, the great Egyptian civilization started to grow, all thanks to the River Nile.
This scene of destitution is a few miles away from Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam. Local people here still live in prehistory, with no running water or electricity or decent homes. They say they are patiently waiting for the benefits of the dam. What patience is there to master these workers need to finish the mammoth task? They wake the night. Daytime shifts are busier as the work progresses.
The project is made up of three parts: civil works, which are now 87% complete, the steel works, which are going a bit slow with 17% completed, and the electromechanical works at 35%. And all those three components show that the dam is 71.2% complete. We're planning to start filling the reservoir next June and will be able to start producing electricity a year later.
Once finished, these giant tubes will channel the river waters down through turbines 9 and 10, which are still to be placed here. The powerful jets will rotate the turbines, and the hydropower engines linked to them will transform that into electricity. Each turbine will produce 370 megawatt. When all the 13 turbines are completed, the dam will be able to produce a little less than 6,000 megawatt, enough to satisfy Ethiopia's needs and to export electricity to regions as far away as Southern Africa and Western Europe.
As you can see behind me, that middle section hasn't yet been finished. It will require 2 million cubic meters of rolled concrete slabs to raise it to the final height. That's also where the 13 power turbines will be inserted. 2 of them will become operational early next year, and that's when the first hydropower production begins.
Ethiopia says this is crucial for its economic development. Sudan, the passage country, believes it has nothing to fear, despite warnings by some of its senior experts. But Egypt, the river's historic destination, feels threatened. Since the dawn of time, it had the lion's share of the Blue Nile waters. But the desert country described by Herodotus as the gift of the Nile believes the dam may deprive its population of its most vital resource, especially if Ethiopia insists on filling the 74 billion cubic meter reservoir in 3 years. Egypt has suggested it should take no less than 7 years. As the talks in Washington, D.C. stumble at each round, time is of the essence to both nations. Meanwhile, the historic dam continues to take its final shape. For the legendary river, this is a mighty handle that will control every drop of it for the first time in history. A river that flew freely in the wild for millions of years is from now on forced to squeeze its way through these narrow iron frames of brick and mortar. Its future, and perhaps that of the millions of people on its path, is now set in stone for ages to come. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera.
This project will equally benefit the downstream countries as it will benefit Ethiopia, equally, 50-50. So 100% will be benefited, and at the same time, the downstream countries will be also benefited. How? It will be used as a flood protection structure. We are building this dam up on Abai River to generate electricity. We are investing our hard-earned money. We don't compromise on quality. We don't compromise any safety. As I have already mentioned you earlier in my slides, we are following international standards, codes, guidelines, rules. We are just applying that practice, that engineering, that science